evening, everybody. I'll call to order our town board meeting for March 8th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. As always, we are virtual on our website, on Facebook, as well as YouTube. We're streaming there live, and our meetings are conducted on Zoom so that if folks are interested in participating from home, they have that option as well. For any information about how to join our Zoom, you can find that at the top of each of our agendas as the first item. So next up, I will ask Deputy Supervisor Bollinger to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Next up, Councilor Waters has something to read for International Women's Day.
I just wanted to sort of highlight that we conducted a pay equity analysis, and it's really the first time that we've ever done this in the town, and we did it bringing this up on International Women's Day because the gender pay gap in the US has been well documented across all sectors. And so we learned a lot from this exercise, and it really showed us what we need to do to continue to improve on this front. Just so you can understand what the pay gap is today on International Women's Day, women in New York typically make 89 cents for every dollar paid to men, and for Black women it's 66 cents, and for Latino women it's 56 cents. And you know, so we have had a gender pay gap as well, and we had CW Analytics delivered some results of a pay equity study that we commissioned. And as a result of the study, the town of Manlius has made some corrections to individual salaries, but today is reasserting its commitment to act on the study's recommendations for systemic maintenance of this effort. So 1, we will recruit diverse employees. 2, we'll perform market analyses for titles, responsibilities, and years of service. And 3, we will recognize the value of institutional memory and skill development, because the thing that we learned is that often people were penalized for staying in roles longer, and because we didn't have systemic processes for raises across the board, it wasn't instituted. Some people fell behind simply because they were in different types of jobs, and the higher paying jobs within the municipality often were dominated by men that were interested in them. For example, our wonderful assessor and our town highway superintendent are 2 of the higher paid jobs, for example, and they're often, but not exclusively, held by men. And so there are some more information, some highlights of our study itself and what these gaps were particularly, but basically this is something we need to work on. So for today, I just wanted to highlight this issue, and it's about where what we're striving towards, for sure. Thank you. Thank you.
So next up, we have open podium. So this is an opportunity for folks, for residents to come ask us a question, give us some comments. Do we have anybody who signed up for open podium?
I didn't grab the sheet for the started, so.
So is anybody here, show of hands, to speak for open podium? Come on up. And then if there is anyone in attendance virtually, please use the raise hand function if you would like to speak for open podium. So, good. So you got about 3 minutes, your name, your address, and then go right into it.
And please speak to the speaker too, so people online can.
These little guys right here.
All right, hi, it's Reese Reagan, 4881 Northgate Drive. And I'm here to represent the elderly that receive Social Security and disabled. The New York State has adjusted the 50% for reduction up to 50% income. The income limit has been changed to 50,000 for minimum. And I just want to make sure that you guys also represent the disabled and the elderly by going along with these guidelines.
Last month, I think we went to the maximum allowed.
In December.
Oh, yeah.
And was the Village of Manlius also on board? Did they do the same?
I had some conversations with the mayor. I don't know where they ended up, but they were interested in making some adjustments.
Are they, so they're not supposed to, if you do, a separate board.
Yeah, that's a separate board.
Okay, so wonderful.
Thank you so much. Hey, anyone else? Okay, anyone remote? Okay, so we'll roll right along. So first up, we have the CMI Land Trust Public Assembly Permit Application.
Hi, everybody. I guess I'll go to the podium.
That would be great, thank you.
Great. Well, allow me to introduce myself as Simon Solomon, the Executive Director of the Central New York Land Trust. I've been there a mere 6.5 months, so I'm getting acquainted still, but I have a lot of lofty goals. So I grew up in upstate New York. I live in Casanova right now, but I make the daily commute to Skaneateles. So we applied and made application to host our Evergreen Everblue fundraising dinner event at our Woodchuck Hill parcel this year. The date would be Saturday, August 12th, 2023 from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. I've run through the entire process. I worked with Lisa Beeman and Tom Poitras on that. So there was an 18-question questionnaire. I provided all the liability insurance, proof of insurance, additionally insured status. And just today, I finalized and sent to John and Tom the application for erecting structures, just tents. That also requires proof of workers' comp and application, and all that was submitted. So I reached out to Tom last week just to really discuss, next steps. We'd like to advertise the event. We'd like to be approved to host the event there. The reason I made application to the town is because we're expecting to surpass 100 people in attendance. We'd love to have as many people as we could, right? We anticipate having anywhere between 100 to 250 people in attendance that night, which is why I'm here tonight. I'm really looking for your blessing, your approval. Tom suggested I go on the agenda, get approved by the town board, and then I would work with Tom on the code aspect of things moving forward. So I think you should have all that documentation.
Does anyone have any questions?
No, if it's for parking, sometimes with bigger events, we have to make sure that we have police presence for traffic, et cetera. So, but you have lots of parking space there for sure, right? So there wouldn't be a jam to get in or out.
No, there shouldn't be, and we submitted a map that you might see as well. And we will have police present on the property that night, but that's mainly for checks and balances. We don't expect to have police presence for the in and the out of traffic flow, but we expect that it should be accommodating for everyone in the public building.
When you work with Tom, you'll also work with the fire departments to make sure that the parking is all set and the fire codes and everything.
Yes, and on that map, we had to kind of do a schematic of that. So, I'm more than happy to work with Tom. It seems like Tom and I already have kind of a good relationship going, so I'm happy to continue that and to follow through with everything that's expected.
We learned, I talked to Tom about it not too long ago. We learned quite a bit about the rules for putting up tents.
There are lots of that.
Yeah, there are quite a few of them, so.
Tim, did you replace?
Well, I would suggest, I think the applicant's here just to make sure that he's not missing anything and that the board is not going to, that there may be specific concerns. I know Tom has looked at this and he seems to be fine with the concept. You can certainly direct me to prepare a permit, the actual permit for this. It's not until August, but I'm sure that earlier.
I'd like to advertise.
So if you want me for the next meeting to have something prepared.
Does anybody have any issues with that? Oh,
I
that sounds
think-
good.
So I guess the only issue that I thought I would have is parking, and you do show in the map where you think you can accommodate everybody. If you really get 250 people, do you have a backup space across the street or another thing that you'd be considering?
Yeah, so we own each side of that drive as you go down, Central New York Land Trust does. We're applying for the town of Manlius side. The other side is actually Fayetteville, but the meadow is quite large, so we could spread people out. With 250 people, I think we could expect somewhere between 120 to 130 cars. I don't expect we'll have 250 cars.
Did you meet Town of Manlius and Town of DeWitt?
Yes.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
Learning to lay the ground.
Sure.
So it's not crucial, but are the neighbors aware of this and they're fine if there's? gonna be an
So
event
the
that day?
Woodchuck
Done any
Friends group,
outreach there?
yeah, so the Woodchuck Friends group are aware. And we've also told them that we're gonna give a percentage of the profit from the fundraising event back to the preserve itself.
It'll be a good show.
Yeah.
Great musician.
I'm hoping that.
Okay, so
Thank you.
we'll look to approve that
Sure.
hopefully at the next meeting.
Sure. We have to make a motion. Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up, we have the Kinsella Quarry Zone Change Application for 11.8 acres from RA to NRRD. We've got a resolution for referral to the planning board, but I understand some, the councilors have some things they'd like to share. So
Yes.
feel free.
So Elaine, do you want to go first? Or me? So, I believe that it's responsibility of the town board to consider the greater implications of decisions beyond the needs and preferences of both the zone change applicant and the contiguous neighbors. Sometimes the implications of zoning decisions are relatively minor, and sometimes they have significant impact. This zone change request has regional impact. New York State, other municipalities, and countless contractors depend on TH Kinsella Quarry for aggregate stone and gravel. Moreover, the quarry accepts leaves, logs, fills, millings, compost, and other debris that would otherwise be a disposal challenge and additional costs for local municipalities. We are all aware that Onondaga County is planning for an increase in construction of commercial and residential property that will include the expansion of utility infrastructure. This construction will require aggregate stone and gravel. The mine within the current boundaries of the natural resource removal district between Route 5 and Salt Springs Road is almost fully depleted. The proposed zone change is modest given the scale of the entire quarry and is completely within the existing berm screening it from neighboring properties. The proposed zone change does not include any of the buffer land nor any of the excluded area described in the 2003 settlement agreement with the Changing Seasons Homeowners Association.
Elaine, do you mind taking out the mask for just that part of the statement? Thank you.
Trying to think of where I want. Well, so, because I have some questions on the application, but then I can start with my, I guess. So since the town was founded, the town has been mined for its resources. You see the history of this as you drive around town with pretty but dangerous lakes that were once quarries and land that sat empty for decades due to the expensive cost of redeveloping the land after being deprived of its resources. Town residents have protested against the quarries since the town first issued Kinsella's permit in 1982. Each time Kinsella has come back to the town for more. In 1994, Kinsella applied for another 78 acres. The town board only approved 40, as they did not have a supermajority to approve all 78 acres. Since the town residents submitted a petition opposed to the proposal. Town residents sued the town and Kinsella, and the residents wanted to reject the expansion in the 1990s, with the court concluding that Kinsella was bound by the terms of the covenant as set forth in the 1982 permit. That Kinsella came back again in 2001 for 28.7 acres. This time residents challenged the settlement was agreed to for only the 28.7 acres. 20 years later, they're back again, asking for 11.8 acres, which is, you add this up, seems to equal 40 acres, which sounds very familiar to what was rejected by the court back in 1996. This will not stop. This business is not renewable. The resources that were made millions of years ago will not come back. The town has been mined for its resources for over 200 years. Our population has grown over 18% since the 1980s when Kinsella's permit was first approved. I believe our population will continue to grow. It's time the town took the residents' side in this matter. Plus, there's a legal precedent that we must consider. Other issues to consider as well is that the permit has a reference to a quarry committee that is no longer active, and our NRRD zone needs to be updated to protect residents better. All of this is in progress. Our comprehensive plan is coming out soon for public comment. Once adopted, we plan to rewrite our zoning laws, and we have been studying quarries and have recommendations from a quarry study group to implement. That's where I'll stop.
So does anybody have any questions for the applicant? I know we have one here.
I do.
So would you come up?
Sure.
So the survey map shows 12.967 acres, but the application only states that it's only 11.8 acres. So which one is it?
It's 12 point, it was after the survey was done, they came in with a surveyor and we surveyed it rather than aerial photos. It was originally taken.
So it's 12.9.
Yeah.
So the application needs to be updated to reflect that. And then some of the other issues or questions I had, I guess, or even just issues were page 2 of the full environmental assessment report is incorrect. The BA should be marked is yes, and list the town board for approval. Then B should list the town of Manlius planning board. And then C1 should be marked yes, it's currently marked no, as the zone change would be required because it's done by local law. Then the other question I had too was on E1 about land use. It talks about, like, it shows a chart and it just talks about the 11.8 acres or 12. Wouldn't that include the whole scope of, like, the whole parcel, like all the quarry, or would it only include that tiny addition?
The zone change?
No, I mean like that chart.
The environmental
showing-
impact.
Yeah. Because right now it's just showing, the 11.8 acres, so it's, but that parcel includes much more than that.
Okay, so just so I understand, what section are we reading?
So look at E1, oh, I can tell you.
E1 of the environmental assessment form?
Yes.
Page 6. Page 6.
Thank you.
Are you looking at the revised application from May 8th? Because the revised application has the correct acreage on it and stuff in the.
See, the version we have on our website and the version I have, that's 11.8.
And because that was brought up the first time.
Yeah, I know.
And
I thought
we-
you said before, so I'm like,
And we, I believe we corrected a lot of those questions and
Yeah.
stuff. If you have the latest revised application that we.
Yeah.
So the deed description, needs and bounds description on page. The first page is a letter from Mr. Davidson. The second page is the application, page 1 and then page 2. Then page 3 is the schedule A. And then the next page has the needs and bound description, which is 12.967 acres, which is what is that Roger map. But when you go to the EAF, that was part of this. It will still says 11.8.
Yeah, it does. Page 9, yeah.
So then those things can be easily.
But if there's a version that we should just make sure we have the correct version.
Either that or you're gonna have to update the EAF. If it hasn't been updated to reflect the actual.
What page is the?
So it's page 9 of the environmental
Assessment form.
section.
Gotcha.
In the chart.
Yeah,
In the
I see it.
Okay. And let's get back to page 6, that pulling this stuff out, so I understand what she's saying. So it says 11.8 acres, how much impervious surface will the project create in relation to the total size of the project parcel? And
Oh,
that's the question you have, Elaine, and it says
No.
11.8,
I'm,
and then it says square foot or parcel size. So the parcel size should not be 11.8 is what you're saying, it should be 90 acres or however big that soil.
potentially. That's my question, is this, it's like, it seems like it should be more about the full parcel than just the tiny part, but I don't know.
Well, you have to consider the fact that, and I don't know the date, 19, when the first application was presented and approved, for the NRDD change. An environmental impact statement was done and they did a review of I'm just gonna use this number because I don't know for sure what it is, but the 98 acres, that was originally zoned NRDD. So they did an environmental review during that time.
Right,
Now, the environmental review will be update that.
right, so it would be on the whole thing.
Yeah, it would be-
28.7 acres that they did in 2003.
Right, plus on top of that, the
The 12
11.8 or 12.96 acres would be what the environmental review would be. So, what has changed
Yeah.
since that time took, since it was originally approved?
Yeah.
On that site, plus on top of what has changed, then there's an additional 12 point something acres that has to be considered for an environmental impact statement from a seeker review
Yeah.
process.
Okay.
So did that make sense to you?
Yeah, yeah. So originally, when we went in for the 40 acres that you were referring to, that was the original DEIS and the study for the impacts of the whole piece. And then when we pulled it back in, it just scaled it back, but we originally did the DEIS on the whole 40 acres. So we're proposing.
What year was that? That is.
That was 94. When they did, then in 2003, I believe, started in 94, then in 2003, when it went back to the 29 acres. You know, obviously, we'd already done the study for that parcel too, it was included in the 40 acres.
So it seems like that should be updated to include
It's new
the
space.
new part. So it should be total.
So by the time we get to seeker, it should be the full time.
Yes.
You said that.
23 plus 12.
Okay, yes, I think we're very preliminary in terms of the discussion on seeker. I don't know that we're in a position today to do a seeker analysis of this project.
But I think we need to clarify what Kinsella needs to be working on.
And if this goes to the planning board, then I think that probably a question we can ask the planning board, as to whether or not what their opinion is as to what are the seeker issues that have to be handled.
That'll be part of their review process if we just send it to the planning board.
So I guess my other question then too is with the NRRD zone, it says in our code that we need designated engineer to carry out the application. When do we do that? If, I guess. So to provide, it says we have to designate one to provide a written opinion from them. And to provide like a form, I guess it says a form prescribed by the town board. So we get so I guess we have to figure out that form. And then also a type of graph, like a description, and then a typographic map. And a list of all the landowners within 500 feet. And so this is all supposed to be in the application. So that's where I'm just like, where is? But maybe it's coming later.
Yeah, I don't think, right now, there is a local law drafted based on the application that's been provided, that this board is considering sending to the planning board for them to just make an initial review on, and then get back to the town board on what their thoughts are. I think that if it goes to the planning board and back to the town board, right now, the planning board has its own engineer, and they will use their engineer to determine what environmental issues should be identified and brought to the town board's attention. If it comes back to the town board, then at that point, I assume we will then use our engineer to really get much more in detail as to what is going to be needed under the NRDD law to move the project forward, if that's what the board desires.
And the law does say it's before any excavation or removal of trees, rock, topsoil, for any purpose other than those accepted under the subsequent provision. So
Right, but like, so I look back at 2002 at that process they used then, and it seemed like there was, and I understand that's a little bit larger scope than what this is, but they seem to create a scoping outline to kind of, it looked like, I don't know what its scoping outline looked like, but I assumed it was like, this is what we're going to look at and kind of have a plan. And then the town board gathered the impact statement before sending it to the planning board, which to me seems to make sense, because then you have all the material to review all at once. Whereas here, are we doing a DEI and then sending it to the planning board after that?
well, I think the general idea was to send it to the planning board so that they can start looking at it, asking those questions, and essentially adding them to the group of people that are asking those questions, looking for all those extra pieces.
But I hear what Elaine's saying, and she's saying, well, what is it that the engineer would actually look at? And
Right,
what's the
like, if
guidance
we
for what they're
had
looking at for the
a
planning board?
scoping outline or even a DIS or what have you, then we already know this is what we want looked at versus right now, we're just gonna potentially send it to the planning board and say, hey, can you tell us, or is there any environmental impact? It's very,
Well, that's
Yeah,
what
you-
we're asking them to make a recommendation regarding the zone change, not approval of the site. That's a different.
Zone
process.
change to
To
natural
mine
resources.
resources.
Yeah, and to a very specific one. And the other thing is what we learned through the process is that there could be the absence of information about endangered species, or not even endangered species, but just biodiversity that we are trying to achieve in the climate action plan that would, of a cursory review, would say, oh, there's nothing that conflicts, because we haven't even studied anything that we've been recommended to study. So I think that it's a little like, we're gonna do confirmation bias here, with what we already know versus a real process of, you know.
So I think our engineer is supposed, because this is technical, that our engineer would read whatever Concella's engineer wrote and say yes or no, or they left off looking for endangered species or whatever.
Well,
you
they
know,
tell us what they're missing.
what they're missing, yeah. Or what would be even suggested as best practice. So that's where the scoping part comes in, that our engineer would help with designing that.
Well, like the climate action plan, we talked today about some huge goals around carbon sequestration and reducing emissions. And that's gonna be passed, it's pending review, and that's not even happening until May. So that means we'd be referring something to the planning board without that context or the comprehensive plan context. That's a concern I have. I just timing wise, I understand, it makes sense to. If this needs to get done, the planning board would need to feedback, of course, but we have some two key actions that we're not ready for, I don't think.
So then. We do have the resolution before us to send it to the planning board. And
So I guess I want to just clarify, are you asking for a new environmental impact statement now?
I don't think we can. What, we're maybe looking into doing a scoping thing.
Okay.
I think. So that way we have, well, I mean, again, I've been in the town records, they're very, very good. We can see what they looked at 20 years ago for their scoping thing. And then in their scoping process, they created an outline and then they asked the public to give public comment on it as well. So the public had time to say, hey, no, we need, maybe you need to look at this or that, which is great. A good practice.
So I would like to make a motion to refer the zone change application made by Kinsella Quarries for the expansion of 12+ acres in the existing quarry on Route 5 in the town planning board and the Onondaga County Planning Board as outlined in the resolution prepared by the junior group town, with the amendment that we're going to specifically ask the planning board to make recommendations regarding seeker scoping or environmental scoping. So the things that questions that they would want answered that we could put into the environmental. Does that work for you?
So you're making a motion to send this to the planning board with that?
With that,
amendment?
we're asking them specifically.
No, it doesn't work for me, but I can vote.
a second.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. So seeing that the motion does not have the support,
Fails.
so. What are next steps for us?
Well,
Doesn't seem the board has the interest in moving the zone change forward.
yeah. Well, to give some finality, I guess, the minister would certainly reflect that we are absent one town board member. And that's why we ended up in a deadlock tonight. I would suggest that either a motion be made or the minutes reflect that. To give everybody a sense of conclusion that this item be removed from the agenda. Unless there's something in writing from a majority of the members of this board to put it back on the agenda, something like that.
I don't think there needs to be motions to do that, though. I mean, really, there's,
Okay, well, then,
There's no
then it's just gonna hang out there for,
Well,
which is okay. I mean,
But when Sarah, the reason I want a clarification from Sarah is because she wanted to refer this to the planning board with a request for the scoping information. So that is something that we've discussed and we're completely open to having that conversation, understanding the scoping. I mean, the points that I made were that we need to have a clear understanding about what our town commitments and what the community's commitments are around the comprehensive plan and the climate action plan. And we should have those in a couple of months. So if that's a timeline,
so are you suggesting that this could come back to the board, the town board, once those documents have been finalized and we have a better sense of what they are? And we can come back to the town board for a referral to the planning
I
board?
mean, even if we voted, something else could always come back to the board. We voted before, turned it down and come back, like that happens naturally.
that happened with the inland port.
I was asked a question, I'm trying to respond to the question.
That's debating.
In terms of finality.
So then, my understanding is that the board, as it stands right now, we feel that we've addressed the application. There's currently not an interest. There are still questions about the application that we can have conversations about. That, you know, if the application is amended, we can have further conversations, but as of right now, the current application as it is, there's no interest in the board taking this any further.
Well, there's certainly not a majority of the members of this board who would
Yes.
push this forward. That's it.
Okay. Anything else? Any other comments on that?
Yeah, it's tense and difficult because let's call out what it is, that it's, this is a, you know, an important business to the community and it's your livelihood and that's the awkwardness. That it's a hard thing to make, to vote on this in a context, but be a human being and know that you're a neighbor and that you were in good faith trying to move something forward. So,
And I will say too, there's been significant discussion, with the applicant, with the neighbors.
yeah.
So it's not like this was something that we sat down today to make a decision on.
No, it's been a lot of work.
So I do thank you very much for the application and the time that was put into this and to the residents who've had those conversations.
So the application's been denied then if it's.
No, there wasn't enough support to move the application to the planning board. Or their recommendation, so that's where it stands. There's no enough support within the board to move the application for a zone change, which is a local law. Which is literally legislative act. So there's not enough support to move that legislative act to the next step.
As the application was submitted today,
Or as it stands.
as it stands today. As how it was presented to us today, there wasn't enough to move to the planning board. So if we made changes to it and presented it to us again in the future, it may be able to.
I wouldn't, okay, yeah, but I wouldn't
It's
promise that.
possible.
Yeah, I wouldn't make promises.
I didn't,
think-
I
yeah,
said May.
Yeah, I
said
understand.
May,
I
and you said the same thing in a couple months when.
All right,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we'll, as of right now, we'll consider it resolved if there's not a majority of support of the board to move this forward.
And in the environmental questions that are on here, I mean, at what point would that, how do we know where to go with that? Or, you know, you're saying that you're denying moving this forward based on, you've got environmental questions on the application. When do we just come forth? Do we assume what we need to know? Isn't part of that secret with the questions that would be asked?
My main concern on this application is actually not environmental. My concern is legal. And it's just because of the history of the legal,
And so
cases here.
feel free to reach out to the board members to have conversations about what the board would be looking for to see that support so we can move it forward. But as of right now, with this board, we don't have a majority of support to move it forward.
Yeah, this board cannot. You need a majority of the board to take action. Right now, you don't have majority of the board to move the project forward, so. I don't see it as a denial, I simply see it as there's not enough support to move an item that we're seeking.
Understood.
And it is. It's not, It's not like a site plan or a subdivision or a special use permit. This is a legislative act. In other words, it's a local law to change the zoning for a parcel of land. And as I sit here tonight, seeing the board, there is not a majority. There's not enough support from a majority of the board to move that local law forward.
This is an important aspect that I do want to comment on, but I had originally intended to support moving this forward to a planning board for consideration, but as Attorney Petesky just explained, it's not really a site plan review type of consideration, it's a legislative act. And so I arrived at some misgivings around sort of the quality and accuracy of the application, as Councilor Denton pointed out. It kind of troubled me. These are repairable, you know, in the future, I'm sure. But more important to me is, given the legislative responsibility of this board here, is questions about, you know, comportment with the spirit and intent of the settlement agreement with respect to the westward expansion of this particular piece of land. And, you know, the need for absolute clarity on that before moving forward to the more procedural side of hitting it into the planning board and going through secret again. I, from my seat, want to see more of that addressed here as the legislative body. What concessions, how can we be good neighbors as residents with a quarry, and how can we as a quarry and mining operation be good neighbors with the residents and those areas addressed before passing it through to the procedural next step?
Any other comments from the board? Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, next up, steering committee public hearing for the draft comprehensive plan. We're gonna be setting a date.
Yeah, sure. I'd like to make a motion to set a date for the Town of Manlius Comprehensive Planning Steering Committee to hold a public hearing on March 28th at 6 p.m. here at Town Hall in this room.
Actually, it's 6:30.
Oh, yeah, it's a regular time, 6:30.
I looked that, I was trying to get the slide from Grace to get clarification on that, and I didn't get that today, so.
Yeah, it's the public hearing is at 6:30. There's a community open house starting at 5.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. So a community open house starting at 5 and the public hearing, that's what this motion is, at 6:35 or 6:30.
6:30 is fine.
Okay.
I think it's the only thing happening.
Okay, at Town Hall to hear public comments of the draft comprehensive plan.
Good. All those in favor? Aye.
Can we discuss for a moment? So this is the steering committee.
Right.
For, holding a public hearing.
Right, so the draft of the comprehensive plan that the steering committee is presenting to the public in the workshop at 5 will be, they will vote. They will have that, it's important to get feedback, but they will vote on their own approval of that, of what they've prepared, basically.
On the 20th,
Mhm.
that far.
Mhm.
And then they're going to present it to the public at 6:30.
Then they vote at 6:30.
No, they vote, they presented early, they presented at 5 p.m. There's an open house
Oh,
with
they-
information about it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
then the technical
hearing.
public hearing.
Mhm.
Starts at
People can
6:30.
comment
Mhm.
and then.
But the comments are still available to us to be integrated into a draft, and the steering committee is basically concluding their official work
So
on
like
it.
the steering committee's closing out,
Right.
they're gonna do a public hearing and then it's gonna come to us.
Mhm.
And so
And
then we will have our own public hearing.
Correct.
Tied to different dates. Just to
Yep,
make sure
and this is the,
everyone-
then this is the New York State process for it too.
Yeah.
It's 10-year plan, but it's taken us what, 3 years to do it, so,
Aye. So all those in favor?
Oh, okay.
March 28th
So what time?
at 6:30. 6:30.
6:30.
There's an open house here at 5 though.
Is that on the website right now?
Not yet.
No.
Will that be moving?
But we'll
If you
make
bring
sure,
some,
we'll make
yes.
sure we get that up on the website with the specific times.
Is there a copy of the draft?
That will be on the website too. It's not, we just met last night, so she's making the revisions and then we'll put it up on the website.
But are we put it in like the news section?
We can do that.
It'll be right on the homepage then.
Good. Sounds good. Okay. So all those in favor?
Fine.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. So next up, do you have something on
I
this?
please, so I'd like to thank Senator Mannion, the town of Manlius has applied for and been awarded a $50,000 grant to purchase an electric vehicle and equipment for the police department, so the first electric police car, which we're thinking is actually going to be a truck so that it can tow the trailer thing with the investigation trailer.
The command, yeah, the commands.
Yeah,
Oh, super.
and it will be, we're thinking at this point that it would be designated for the community
Support unit.
support unit.
That's great.
And so people will be able to come and see the electric vehicle as part of their public relations duties, and that's also would make it feasible to be charging overnight where the regular cars can't do that. So, so that would be the plan. So we need to accept this, and did you need to say anything more about the? So we need to just vote to accept this.
I just have a question, because we received SAM grants for the planning and development, but then we haven't received them yet.
It's
Like,
been-
how does that work with?
It's a reimbursement, so we have to pay first and then we get the money later.
So, but with demand, if it happens, however, in the future, it'll still be reimbursed.
And it's through the state office of dormitory authority, which makes no sense, but that's what it is.
Okay.
State
Daphne.
person.
That's great.
So I make that motion to approve that.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. So if you weren't here, we had a pretty great work session. We went over our climate action plan and we were talking about how we meet our 2030 goals for emission reduction. And, basically the long and short of it was we have to electrify the police department. So this is a
First step.
great first step. Yeah.
And then I think Chief Kroll is on the Zoom, if you'd like to make a comment about the surplus.
He is just an attendee.
Oh, all
Oh,
right,
yeah. Do you want to just cover it?
Did you want me to have him?
I can do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just have, excuse me. We have the discontinued model X26P tasers that we are ready to declare as surplus. And we actually have a buyer for them, so.
Cool.
I would make a motion to accept these, to designate these as surplus.
It's right here.
Motion to declare.
To declare 13 model XP26Ts tasers and accessories as surplus.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carried.
To the appraisal, okay. So you may recall that at the last January meeting, we authorized an appraisal for the property at Twin Shores.
No, we're sure, yeah.
And so we'd like to make a motion to approve the fee proposal and assignment agreement with CNY Pomeroy Appraisers, Inc. at a rate of $3,400 to prepare an appraisal for the potential town hall property located on North Burdick Street.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. And next up, we've got some updates.
Sure, yeah, Deputy Supervisor Ballinger and myself were generously sent to the Association of Towns Annual Training Seminar and Conference late last month. And had a great opportunity to attend a number of really informative workshops and trainings, and some networking, and just, I won't touch upon everything, but some of the things that are very germane to our work here in the town of Manlius are a lot of conversation on accessory dwelling units. As we speak about density and zoning in our town to bring ourselves closer to that goal of those housing goals, the governor's proposal. There's some pros and cons to this approach, as we determined that accessory dwelling units are not necessarily affordable to implement, but they are a great method to reach density goals and attain that safe harbor status so that we can. There was a very interesting and I think timely presentation by the town of Brighton about their efforts to implement diversity, equity, and inclusion into all aspects of their municipal operations, going so far as to budget for and hire a diversity and equity personnel, staff member. So that was very interesting, and concerns about short-term rentals and assessing their activities in town. There were some very interesting product demonstrations, let me say, as Councilor Bollinger and I were chatting over coffee or something, an individual was able to pull up and say, you have 16 short-term rentals in the town of Manlius right now. No, so something for Pat. Other than that, a discussion and not a discussion on cannabis regulations updates, which where there weren't many. Other than that, I'll leave, there were 13 or 14 others I took copious notes on, but those were the real highlights for me this year. And I think it'll all be very good for us all to chew on some of this material as we wrap comprehensive plan up. And it's helpful to really see what's going on in the other towns too. And before signing off on this topic, it was nice to see our former town supervisor at Theobald vetted at this event.
Oh, that's
Not
nice.
for-
What did they do?
Well, they had, I don't want to embarrass them, but they had a great breakfast presentation for him that he missed.
That's great.
Well, thank you both very much for going and representing the town of Manlius there. Really appreciate it.
Sure, yes, we, next is that, Sarah arranged, 2 meetings that we had with Senator John Mannion, New York State Senator John Mannion, and New York State Assembly Member Alistair B. And we were able to speak with them at this very important time while they're working on the budget. This is the crunch time, for these folks, before the April 1st budget is released. And so they are in conference all the time, trying to come up with the one house, the kind of the coordinated view, and you sort of know what's getting funded, what's not. And you, I think it's also a great opportunity for us to understand what are their top priorities and what are they trying to communicate back to us? What are they hopeful that we can be partners on? And we shared what we had been hearing from the residents. We wanted to make sure they knew exactly what our larger activities and projects are. They needed to know about the what was happening on North Burdick Street and you know, kept up to date with that, the comprehensive plan and the climate action plan. And that dovetailed really nicely with the huge emphasis that Assemblyman Sturpey talked about related to how to get basically behavior change amongst residents to think about updating their own, you know, updating sort of what's going on in their home and in their daily life related to carbon and kind of aligning with how can we actually move the behemoth forward? Because we made a joke about the appliances and he said, I know, I can't, you know, my wife, I don't know if she's going to give up her gas stove for an induction appliance, but at the same time, how do we get from that very jokey sort of stance where, you know, they're coming to take our stoves versus, all right, well, what's a practical way to incentivize people and get the word out about these opportunities and incentivize communities to do it. And we said, listen, if you're willing to throw a good grants, incentives, opportunities, and you want a community to partner with, we're trying really hard to take a step forward and make a difference here. So we communicated that to him. And were there other things with Al that you wanted to make sure we highlighted? Before I talk about John, okay, and then Senator Mannion is also very interested in making sure that he represents us on the civil service exam side of things, because what we're noticing is that it's a bit of an obstacle to have to choose the top 3 people who happen to be on the list for civil service exams, because especially with COVID, the access to the exam has been so radically reduced. They haven't been given as often. And so it's a labor problem for us to not be able to get people seen and into great opportunities. So there is an adjustment to that the state is looking at to do there were waivers during COVID that you didn't have to choose the very top 3 folks. Say, for example, someone's, you know, 3 counties over or whatever it is. Sometimes there are logistical issues that don't make sense for someone's fit and whether they'll be retained and stay on, for example. And so he was very open to, he was talking to us about some state support that's coming through on that point and was coordinated. I think, and we thanked him, of course, for the SAM grants. And then Oh, well, and the other thing is that we are so lucky to have leaders of our municipal operations who are also advocates. And we're really lucky that Rob Cushing, our highway superintendent, is one of the leaders of the Highway Superintendents Association statewide. And so they were going yesterday, I think, to lobby all.
That's why he's not here. He's in Albany.
Yeah, he's not. And so it was good to hear, we made sure we sectioned it out, and it was a different time than when we were talking, we followed guidelines. But we were able to listen in and hear what they were asking for, and of course, it's CHIPS funding, and we talked about AIM support as well, and wanting to make sure that that didn't stay flat. But CHIPS funding, which is the highway fund, basically. Along with the fact that CDL licensure is very difficult, and what's happening is that people are getting the opportunity maybe to train with the municipality and then get paid a higher wage really nearby. And it's kind of what happens sometimes within the police department. We want to keep folks and not have our investment in their education and certification not be something we benefit from. So that was another important point. Thank you.
Do you want to touch on one number?
Yeah, so, Councilor Creasel's not here tonight, so, we had a meeting with the Syracuse Onondaga County Planning Agency regarding, the possibility of developing a planned, urban development on the North Burdick Street site, so we just wanted to get the county planning board apprised of the fact that this might be coming and give them a chance to, give their input on how that would go, and, they were open to the suggestion, they thought that there could be advantages to, connectivity between the village of Fayetteville and the Erie Canal. That was a strong component of what the county plan is looking for, is these connecting local businesses, shops and restaurants with the canal so that we can increase the tourism. So they were in favor of that. They were in favor of the apartment style housing that is under consideration. So it was a very good meeting, and this project has a long way to go, so it was very preliminary, but we just wanted to make sure they were aware.
Do you mind giving the description of what a PUD?
Okay, so
Is-
a planned unit development is where the zone is just for that property to do something that's suitable for that property. And if you're familiar with it, the land is very unique there because of the ponds, and there's not a lot of buildable surface. So in terms of our regular code, you could not build very many houses there because you don't have enough land, the space is actually water. But we can permit greater density on the land using a special zoning code, which would be the PUD, allows for special zoning to say this property is big, even though it's not buildable, and we could put in a bigger apartment unit there. So that's what we would be doing if we ever get to that point, that was what we discussed.
Excellent. Supervisor's report?
So the supervisory report for this month is actually for December because takes a couple months to close out the year. And I would like to thank our department heads because I went through the year-end budget to actual, and pretty much everybody was 3% under budget. So that is a good thing. So I would now move to approve the supervisor's report for December 2022.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Minutes for February 22nd.
Motion to approve the minutes from February 22nd, 2023.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
The abstract for March 7th is $308,976.31. Abstract number 5.
That motion.
Motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. And then I'll look for a motion for executive session.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session. Gotcha. Motion to enter into an executive session to discuss the employment history of a particular person and or employee of the town of Manlius.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Executive session. We need everybody to get out of here for a little while. More than welcome to join us afterwards.
Okay.
So, I was like, where is she? Your help is here.
I just, prop the door open, Alyssa.
To make a motion to adjourn the meeting. When Alyssa's ready.
And then the people come back in.
Oh, people are coming, okay.
It's fine. Is there a second to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.